This is Bud. Good morning. How we doing?
Have you spoken to the Sanders campaign at all, and do you have any plans to potentially visit him or anything while you're here?
We're reaching out to send good wishes. I'm not sure what he needs right now is a visit from somebody like me, but definitely want to let him know, of course, that we're thinking of him and wishing him a very speedy recovery.
Mayor Buttigieg, obviously Ukraine still going to be news, probably going to be news for a long time.
Yeah.
Question going to a lot of candidates. Some have answered, some have dodged it, but would you allow your vice president's son or daughter to serve on a foreign board, especially if that board was being investigated by the United States government, their government?
So one thing that I think is really important right now is to deny this president to change the subject. And the subject is that the president confessed on national television to an abuse of power. Let's deal with that and not get caught in the shiny objects he's going to throw out.
But it's a yes or no question. Would you allow your vice president's
and again,
serve on a board like that?
Playing that game is playing the president's game, and the moment you're playing it, even when you're winning, you're losing.
Mayor, on the issue of AR-15s, obviously, as you know, and as I know, the military doesn't actually issue out AR-15s, and so critics say that it's misleading to label AR-15s as weapons of war, since we actually carry M16s and M4s because of their ability to actually be on automatic fire. So what would you say to those critics?
I would invite them to visit the city of Dayton and see just how many people that a gunman was able to kill and injure in a matter of seconds because of the weaponry that he had access to. And whether we're talking about AKs, ARs, or anything else that even remotely resembles an M4 and M16, the point is not the small differences in firing mechanisms or certain capabilities. The point is that there are weapons with destructive power that there is simply no justification for them to be in civilian hands, including, in my view, AR-15s.
And then, obviously, you're saying that you're for a new ban on new AR-15s and AK-47s. Would you, instead of confiscation, would you support what Biden ruled out, which is to have AR-15s be underneath the National Firearms Act, which would treat them like machine guns?
I would not rule out any measure that would get the weapons that are on the streets off the streets. But I also think that right now we have a golden moment to achieve the kinds of agenda items that organizations like Giffords and Everytown and that I have backed for some time, that we know will save lives. That is universal background checks, that is red flag laws, that is disarming domestic abusers, and it is banning the new sale of these kinds of assault weapons. We can do that right now, and then look at other ways to get deadly weapons off the streets.
Why do you say that? Why do you think this is a good time to do that? Why do you feel like?
You can feel that there is something different happening in the power dynamics that have had a stranglehold on Washington for a very long time. But look, you got to keep asking this basic question. How do 90% of Americans want something to happen and Washington still doesn't deliver? At a certain point, that dam has got to break. And if it's not now, if it's not these the moral energy of these young people in a generational alliance with their parents and grandparents, seeing people of various backgrounds and even different politics coming together, if it can be done, it is now, and I believe it can be done.
Do you think impeachment distracts from that, though? You know, you need Republicans in the Senate and the White House to ultimately get on board with something like that. So does the impeachment focus temper that?
Well, the thing is, it's actually really easy because the House has already passed a lot of common sense measures, including on background checks. The bill is right there. The question is whether the Senate is willing to take it up. I don't see the Senate doing an awful lot of activity of any kind, whether it's related to impeachment or otherwise. It is shaping up to be one of the least productive legislative bodies in the world right now. I think they can handle finding a little bit of capacity to keep Americans safe from gun violence, even while preparing to deal with impeachment proceedings.
Assuming that Senate Republicans still don't agree to any kind of background checks deal, during your first 2 years in office, what do you envision passing and becoming law in terms of gun violence prevention? You and some of the other Democrats have proposed, in addition to background checks, things like an assault weapons ban and national permit to purchase. What do you consider, in addition to background checks, your priorities on gun violence?
Well, I believe all of these things are achievable, especially if we can get the Senate in Democratic hands. Look, if this Senate can act, so much the better. If it can't, then we're going to have to act when the Senate is in the right hands. And by the way, realistically, that almost certainly means the end of the filibuster. Remember, after another mass shooting, there was a majority in the Senate for common sense measures like background checks, and it was shot down due to the filibuster, a measure that I think has long outlived its usefulness to the American people.
Because this is such an emotional issue, which you're well aware of, It gets people on both sides of the topic very excited.
Yep.
Do you feel you have a certain responsibility to calm the nerves of people who are very concerned and maybe oppose the general idea of what you're supporting?
Well, I do think it's important for us to engage an American majority, and we've got to let people know, including a lot of gun owners, responsible gun owners, know that they're not the enemy here. And I think it's why it bears repeating again and again and again that a majority of gun owners even favor things like universal background checks, and I think we're open to ideas like licensing. So we do have to make sure that this is not just one more chapter in the culture war, but a moment where the American people can come together to save the lives, among others, of our students and children.
But when you
And
hear
I think
people
we
talk
can do
about
that.
confiscation, which I'm sure you would say that's not what you're for, banning all guns, coming to take your guns, do you have a responsibility to calm those nerves of people who feel that way?
Yeah, I think our responsibility is to let a lot of people know who might be more conservative or rural that you're not the enemy, but we're asking you to join this American majority to save lives.
To what extent do you see executive action as a useful tool in putting a dent in this problem, and what limitations do you kind of feel exist around that?
I know that presidents have often resorted to executive action when it feels like nothing is getting done. I have to say, though, that this is too important to be left to the whim of an individual president. And because an executive action can be reversed, and because an overwhelming majority of American people want this to get done anyway, I really feel that legislation is the best way forward.
Last question.
Mayor, what distinguishes your plan from the others in the Democratic field?
Well, for one thing, we're paying attention not only to the availability of guns, but to the importance of defeating hate in this country. Because when those two things combine, it is especially toxic and especially deadly. Another thing you'll see in my plan is that we're paying attention not just to the policy moves that we all know that we've got to make, at least all of us who are concerned about this issue, but also the power dynamics that have gotten in the way of these answers. I keep going back to the fact that folks said never again. When I came home one day as a junior and saw the Columbine shooting happen, we have produced a second school shooting generation, and we've got to make sure that there's not a third. In order to actually make that happen, it's not just having the right policies, it's having the will and an action plan to get them done. And my plan speaks to the need for civic engagement and political empowerment for people like the folks who put this event together, who I think really are changing the answer and will defeat the NRA, and there will be proof of that in 2020. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Appreciate it.
Do you think the youth are leading the movement?